Welcome back, guys, to episode 152 of Hashtag AskGSM here today. I'm Graham GSM Matthews. As always, answering your questions from Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you want to send in a question, please do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant on Facebook. Find me there at facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Leave a comment on the post I usually put up on Sunday nights or on the wall itself. Or you can leave a comment on this very video or include your question in next week's edition. So without further ado, I don't have much time today, much like I always do. Maybe about a half hour, 40 minutes or so. So we got to brush through a lot of these questions. But thankfully, we don't have like 4 pages of questions today, only 2. So it's not that bad. But still, I don't want to slight anyone's questions. So anyway, we kick off here with Blue Eyed Sword and my brother Jason. Be sure to subscribe, as always, to his great channel for awesome content. We kick off with a non-wrestling question for today's episode. Top 5 favorite movies of all time. Oh, that's a tough one. That's a great question, but also a tough one. And I know Jason's going to eat me alive for this one because he is a huge movie buff. And I know I've told him this before, so he knows. I've always thought about it in my top 3 movies of all time, never really 5. I'll cheat for the top 5, but for my top 3, it's always been, as of August of 2014, number 3 was originally, because I love the Muppets, and the movie they put out about 5 years ago, with the Action Life movie, the Muppets. I think it was just called Muppets or whatever. Love that movie. That was number 3 for a long time, until Guardians of the Galaxy, which I saw in theaters 3 times. So Guardians is number 3. 2 is Ghostbusters, which I'll be watching on Halloween next Monday, as I always do. And number 1 is Back to the Future, specifically part 2. So I'm going to cheat here for the top 5 and say parts 1 and 3 are also in my top 5 favorite movies of all time, because I can't really think of any other movies that come close to, other than Muppets, Guardians, Ghostbusters, and Back to the Future. So I'm going to cheat and say the other 2 parts of Back to the Future are in my top 5. His second question, do you think that Kenny stays away from Cena backstage on SmackDown, which is so funny. I was thinking the same exact thing. How weird is it that Kenny Dykstra and Mickie James are back in the company at the same exact time? I know Mickey's on NXT, Kenny's on SmackDown, Cena's on SmackDown. He's not there right now. That is really weird. And for anyone that's not familiar with what we're talking about here, it was, I think, I did answer a question about it not too long ago about all the drama surrounding Kenny Dykstra and John Cena. I think I did a WrestleRant video on it about 4 years ago or so. So if you go back in the archives to the early episodes of the show, I know I talked about it at some point. But I know Kenny was dating Mickie James at one point, and presumably she cheated on him to go with John Cena. It was this whole ordeal that led to him leaving. Mickie was gone a while afterwards as well, because the company was kind of like bullying her at that point. They didn't really. She was getting on their shit list for a long time. So, yeah, that must be pretty weird. But I don't know if he's staying away from Cena right now just because Cena's not there. He has been on SmackDown in a few weeks, and I don't think he will be until Survivor Series. And by the time Cena's back, Kenny might be gone. So they might not cross paths, all that much. Frankishire 15, I've seen mixed reviews about Sasha and Charlotte main eventing Hell in a Cell. Don't get me wrong, it'll probably be a great match, but I think it doesn't deserve to be the last match. I feel like WWE is doing this for the sake of it being historic and bragging about how progressive they are. What are your thoughts? That is absolutely part of it. That was evident on Raw last week when they spent more time in the interviews with Sasha, Charlotte, and Lita throughout the show, which were very good, by the way. But they spent much more time, plenty more time talking about how historic it was, blah, 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 as opposed to the fact that this cell can end your career. They did touch upon it a little bit in Sasha's interview, but that was really it. This is the same structure that careers have ended in, so I don't know why they're not really focusing too much on that when they really should, but anyway, they still have tonight. If you're listening to this after the fact, then you'll know better than I do. But they still have tonight to kind of rectify that mistake and talk about how the cell structure is dangerous, how it can kill careers, shorten careers, blah, blah, blah. Ask Mick Foley, the fucking Raw general manager. And I talked about this for 15 minutes on the random video blog from last Thursday. If you want to check out my full thoughts on it, on this whole, whether it should have main event, why should it main event, why it should, why blah, blah, blah. It absolutely should. I understand where you're coming from, that they're doing it for the sake of doing it. But if they're going to do it for the sake of doing it, they would have put fucking Mickie James and Alicia Fox in the main event of Hell in a Cell '09, or Melina versus Jillian Hall, or AJ Lee versus Cameron in the main event of Elimination Chamber 2013. If they were going to do it for the sake of doing it, they would have done it years ago. They're kind of doing it for the sake of doing it, but that's a very small part of it. I'm not saying it's a non-factor, but I'm saying it's a very small part of it. Because these two have been feuding all year. It feels like they need a big stipulation match. Not necessarily Hell in a Cell, but it is October. If you don't put them inside the cell and you put the other two matches inside Satan structure, it's kind of stupid. Because I feel like Owens and Rollins and Reigns and Roode said they should be good matches, but I'm a lot more excited for that match than I am the other two. So really, what does it matter? They're in Boston. They're in Sasha's hometown. Hopefully this will be the last match they'll have for a long time. If not ever. Probably for a long time. I'm sure they'll face off again at some point down the line. But as long as it's not any point in the near future, as long as they don't have a rematch on Raw the next fucking night, then I'm completely fine with it. But, yeah, I feel like they're not just... They are kind of doing it for the sake of doing it, but at the same time, it does deserve to main event the paper. But what other match would? I mean, I get the whole thought process of the Universal title should always headline a pay-per-view. But at the same time, is that feud really that heated? Owens and Rollins has been good, and Sasha and Charlotte hasn't been amazing, but they've been feuding for months. They've been pretty much feuding, if you think about it, since Sasha came back at the Rumble in January, 9 months ago. So, if you're not putting them in the main event, then it's stupid. It's stupid. Captain Sunshine, is it still weird that fans are chanting holy shit? And yes, in regards to something that people spent a decade plus shitting on. The chance for Goldberg Lesnar to be good happened in 2004 and it failed. Now we're adding 12 years of age to both guys, Lesnar's increasing laziness, and expecting Goldberg to deliver when his last actual one-on-one match was a flop, and for what? So Lesnar can get his win back from years ago? Did we not learn from Hogan and Warrior 2? Now with that said, did we just get Goldberg's best promo ever on Raw? It's such a long, out-of-character, mostly humble promo. It's the least Goldberg promo I've ever heard, and maybe that's why it's good. For a match that WWE really needs to be super careful about, this is surprisingly self-aware start. This is a surprisingly self-aware start. So 2 questions there. For the first one, I like that you mentioned Hogan and Warrior 2. I don't know... It was kind of in the same boat. People weren't really clamoring for Hogan and Warrior 2. And when it happened, and it sucked. It was under wrong circumstances. Like, I don't even think people were really all that amped about Warrior in WCW. You know what I mean? It was years after he was in his prime. I mean, then again, I was going to say it was so much longer after the initial one. It was only 8 years. This one's going to be 12. But at the same time, Lesnar's been active, though. Lesnar, I have more faith in him than I do either Hogan or Warrior from 1998 in that... Lesnar's been around for the past 12 years, still wrestling, still doing UFC stuff. Goldberg's still in really good shape. I don't think Warrior was in great shape. The story sucked. That feud did not need to happen. The only reason that match happened was for Hogan to get his win back. And I know this match is kind of similar. Lesnar wants to get his win back. But there's a lot of excitement surrounding Goldberg being back in WCW, WWE. You know, with Warrior, it was like, cool. I don't know. You know, you guys can speak for me here. I was not around watching wrestling in 1998. But to me, watching it back, it doesn't really seem like there was that big of a, clamoring for Warrior to be in WCW. Especially 8 years removed from when he was in his prime. So, I think this match will be better. I think that kind of goes without saying. But it is a little weird because no one was ever really saying, "Oh, I want Goldberg and Lesnar too," just because the first match sucked. But I think there is a chance this could be good, considering the build so far has been very good. We'll see tonight what Lesnar has to say on Raw. Goldberg appears to be in good shape. He was motivated last week, and to answer the second part of your question, yeah, that had to be undoubtedly his best promo of all time because it felt real. It, like you said, it was out of character mostly, but it was better than him just coming in and saying, "Lesnar, you're next." Like, that would have been kind of underwhelming for a guy that spent the past decade in the shadows of the wrestling world. For him to be back and deliver such a speech, and with the crowd anticipation, the crowd excitement and energy there, it just worked on all levels. So it undoubtedly was his best promo of all time. Elena the Y, I like how despite Sanity being a stable of anarchists and whatever, Eric Young still seemed upset when Nikki Cross got DQ'd on NXT. Crazy people in wrestling only work if winning or losing wrestling matches still matter to them. Does the Wyatt family, Wyatt family, anyone, whatever. That didn't really bother me all that much. I mean, they should kind of care about winning and losing. Because the Wyatt family does not care about winning and losing, and no one fucking cares about them. Because they always fucking lose. So, they should really... I know what you're saying, they're crazy, they shouldn't mind. And maybe that can be the case. But if they don't care about winning and losing, then just have them win. You know what I mean? You can't have them not care about winning and losing. Because wins and losses do matter. WWE tries to tell you they don't. But they absolutely fucking do. Because if you lose, then no one cares about you. So how do they not matter? You know what I mean? If you're saying wins and losses don't matter, and you're losing a lot, then no one's going to care about you. So that's what happened to the Wyatt family. So the reverse decision with Nikki Cross and Danielle Camilla, I think her name was, that was fine because she went crazy after the match. So I was completely cool with that. I liked how she slapped Eric Young, so that was kind of different for there. That was kind of like the Wyatt family when Luke Harper would slap Eric Rowan, and like before they would do a double team move. It was really cool. So I didn't really have that big of a deal with it. I didn't really have that big of an issue with it. Emmanuel A., the Cruiserweight division has been criticized for a lack of character development, but Monster actually brought this up on his podcast a few weeks ago. It wasn't like the Cruiserweights on WCW were introduced with intricate personalities either. So what made a 1996 Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero match different from a Brian Kendrick versus TJP match? You know what? Really, it all comes down to this. 20 years ago, wrestling fans, mainstream American wrestling fans, were not used to the matches that we were seeing back 20 years ago between Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero because they were so rare. It was so different from anything that we saw at that time, from a Hogan versus Warrior, as they mentioned. Those matches were fucking killing it. 20 years later, that's all we see. All we see in 2016 are flips and dives and all that other kind of stuff. So like you said, although they didn't have characters and personalities for these guys 20 years ago, I absolutely see what you're saying in that why is it any different that, these guys are lacking from character development, but people were digging the Cruiserweights back then. Why are they suffering now? Because we've seen this we just saw it in the Cruiserweight Classic, better matches than what we're seeing right now. So doing flippity-doo-dahs doesn't really cut it anymore in 2016. There has to be a story there. There has to be a character there. Putting on just a great match does not count for shit these days. It counts for a little bit of something, but that's really what all we see. We have so many great matches in WWE, TNA, Lucha, Ring of Honor, on the Indies, especially PWG, Chaotic, CZW, all these other promotions. That's all you get are the flippity-doo-dahs and stuff like that. So you really kind of grow numb to it over time. And when there's not a character to invest in, it's like, oh, okay, cool match, clap, and that's really it. You know what I mean? So it worked 2 decades ago. It's not going to work now. And that's why they need characters for all these guys in the revamped Cruiserweight division on Raw. The first KFC from YouTube, should James Ellsworth get a SmackDown contract? I said this last week, but to me it made no sense in storyline to give this guy a title shot and not have him be contracted. I mean, what if he won? I mean, on the very slight off chance he won in storyline, for Daniel Bryan, how much sense it would have made to have a champion that's not even contracted to your brand. You know what I'm saying? So, I hope, I assume so. I mean, in real life, I do hope he has a contract, or at least he gets one. He did say in an interview on Tuesday before SmackDown last week that he didn't know what his future with WWE held. So we'll see, where it goes. I think he should be. I heard rumors of him being in the Royal Rumble. I think he deserves it. People like him. Keep on riding those 50 minutes of fame. So I don't see why not. Least favorite Paul Heyman promo. That's a tough one because all his promos are usually at worst good. But I will say his recent promo, I think from late August, early September, whenever it was, with Stephanie, was abysmal. I didn't get it. It didn't go anywhere. It wasn't good. It wasted time. The same promo where he was like dropping the money like bill by bill, and then Stephanie just completely ripped his balls off and had him just kind of just walk away with his tail in between his legs. That promo was such a waste of time because they never followed up on it. That was almost 2 months ago at this point. I really hope it's not building to Lesnar and Shane McMahon. Who fucking cares? If that's the WrestleMania match that people are speculating that it will be, what a waste. What a waste. I'm fine with that on SmackDown or on Raw or even a live special. On a B-level pay-per-view, I'm fine with it. Maybe even at the Rumble. But at WrestleMania, what a waste. Mitch G from YouTube, favorite Jericho match. I'm going to go with the one that you pointed out to me on Facebook a couple days ago because I just got finished watching last night for the hell of it because I'll be at Hell in a Cell on this Sunday, next Sunday, whatever, day before Halloween. I'll be there, so I was watching Hell in a Cell 09 last night, and I really liked their match. You were right, an underrated match was Jericho's match with Batista and Rey Mysterio for the tag titles, so I'm probably going to go with that one as my favorite Jericho match. They didn't have a lot of great matches. They were a great team. They didn't have many amazing matches, but that was a pretty good match. His second question, should the Usos have won the WWE Tag Team Championships from the Brotherhood? To me, the Brotherhood's reign was great up until the nonsensical loss to the New Age Outlaws. I personally would have liked to see a competitive match between the aforementioned teams rather than a transitional 2-month championship run for the Outlaws. So I think the whole purpose of the Outlaws title reign was to basically give them one last hurrah before they rode off into the sunset. I don't think they have wrestled in the company since, right? Oh, no, that's a lie. They had that one match with the Ascension for whatever reason. I don't know why. At the Rumble 2015. So that's a lie. But, I mean, I was fine with them winning the belts, but I think my biggest problem with the New Age Outlaws at that time was that you didn't really know whether to cheer them or boo them. They were kind of aligned with the Authority. They really weren't, but they were. They were feuding with CM Punk. And then they would do their whole, old shtick where people would chant along with them. So people didn't really know whether to cheer them or boo them or whatever. It was really weird. It was really, really weird. It really wasn't. Now that you mentioned that, I really, what made sense was giving the belts to the Outlaws. I was fine with that, just because I'm thinking, okay, it splits up Goldust and Cody in time for a WrestleMania match against each other, which we didn't get. They were both in that fucking Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal as two throwaway competitors, so it was a complete waste to even break them up or take the titles off them, whatever. So now that you mention it, I don't see why not. But my bigger problem at the time, it really didn't matter in the end because the title change was hot. They did it in Chicago on Raw, the March 3rd Raw, which was a great show. I was more concerned that they didn't do it at WrestleMania. The Usos' big title win should have happened at WrestleMania, but then again, the tag team title match wasn't even on the main card. It was on the kickoff show. So I might be happier in retrospect that it happened on Raw and not at Mania because it was on the kickoff show anyway. But, and the Outlaws weren't even in that match. They were in like a 2-minute match against the fucking Shield with Kane. So, yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. It should have been really the Usos versus the Brotherhood because the Outlaws did nothing with the championships, and they weren't really well-defined characters, blah, blah, blah. Keep or erase the triple threat elimination match for the Intercontinental Championship between Tyson Kidd, Cesaro, and Dolph Ziggler from the November 11, 2014 episode of SmackDown, or Sasha Banks versus Becky Lynch from NXT TakeOver Unstoppable. Wow, two great matches. I think the first one is more underrated than the second. Until you mentioned it, I completely forgot about that match, but I think I did rank that the best or most underrated match of 2014, I think it was. I keep on thinking it was 2015, but you're right, it was 2014. So anyway, yeah, that was a great match. I gotta go with Sasha and Becky, though. I really think, because in the long run, really, I mean, Ziggler, Cesaro, and Kidd was a great fucking match. But it did nothing in the long. I completely forgot about it until you mentioned it. Sasha and Becky not only continued the strong streak of great women's matches at TakeOver, but it was really a breakout performance for Becky Lynch, who really came into her own on that night. Despite losing, still emerged from that match as an absolute star. So I got to keep that match and erase a triple threat. Another keep or erase. John Cena versus Rey Mysterio for the WWE Championship from 2011, or Hulk Hogan versus Yokozuna for the WWF Championship from WrestleMania 9. This is a clown question, sir. I know you're saying this because both Rey Mysterio, I think is why you're saying this, because both Rey Mysterio and Yokozuna had short-lived title reigns on those respective nights. But match quality-wise, it's a complete no contest. Absolute no contest. Hogan and Yokozuna, that whole fucking train wreck was, in my opinion, I don't know if it is the worst, but it is absolutely up there as one of, if not the worst, WrestleMania ending of all time. Having Yokozuna beat Bret Hart for the belt and immediately burying the guy by having Hulk Hogan come out, get an automatic title rematch, or just a title match, period. I don't know why you got a title match. Maybe thanks to Bret Hart. I'm not exactly sure how that was explained. Beats Yokozuna in a minute to win the belt. What a fucking waste. and things are back to the way they used to be with Hulk Hogan as champion. And he left the company anyway 2-3 months later. So again, really, what was the point? The match sucked. John Cena and Rey Mysterio, despite Rey Mysterio's 2-hour title reign on Raw that night, that match was great. Cena and Rey was definitely one of my favorite Raw matches ever, and one of the best Raw matches ever, too. That was a really, really good show, July 25th, 2011, a show I will never forget, one of my favorite Raws of all time. But yeah, that match was really, really good, so gotta keep that match a race, Hogan and Yokozuna. Favorite WWE Studios film? Good question. I got a couple, but I would have to say it comes down to 12 Rounds, which I saw in theaters with John, which I like that movie. It wasn't a terrible movie. Maybe in comparison to most movies, it wasn't good, but I still thought it was a good movie for a WWE Studios film, especially. Either that or See No Evil. See No Evil 2 I also liked, and I still have to watch both those movies before Halloween next Monday. But I like See No Evil a lot, so I probably would go with See No Evil and then 12 Rounds, but it could be interchangeable. Brandon A., which wrestlers have ring attire that would make the best costume? So all of his questions from Brandon here are all Halloween themed, which I love. Best costume. One from the past and one from the present, he says. Past, it's either Hogan, Savage, or Warrior. And I'm not just saying that because those are my top 3 favorite legends of all time. But those are 3 great costumes that I've seen in public before. It looks great. Ric Flair, too. Gotta go with Warrior just because of the face paint and all that kind of stuff. Love those costumes, but I'd go with Warrior. One present. You see a lot of... Anyone who's been to a wrestling show in the past 6 months or so would know what I'm talking about. I see a lot of Shinsuke Nakamura's. I saw one, a bunch of them at SummerSlam weekend. I saw one at Extreme Rules. I saw one, I think when we went to NXT in April. I'm not sure. There's a lot of Nakamura cosplays. I'm trying to think of anyone on the main roster that would have, like, everyone really dresses the same, really. If you wore a wife beater and jeans like Dean Ambrose, you don't really look like Dean Ambrose. You have to look like Dean Ambrose physically, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? The costumes don't really make the wrestlers in 2016, which is weird. I know John Cena is pretty recognizable, but I'd probably go Shinsuke Nakamura. If you can pull that costume off, you're a fucking boss. Favorite October match ever? I mean, you could go back to Michaels and Undertaker in the first ever Hell in a Cell match from 1997, Bad Blood, but I wasn't around then, so it's kind of hard to say it was my favorite. I always say that, but it's really difficult to say that a match that happened before I started watching was my favorite. Just in recent years, I know there was a tag team title match that's now available on the network. It was the first month of October that I was watching wrestling for. It was CM Punk and Kofi Kingston. And I think the 8-year anniversary is coming up in the next couple days. It was Punk and Kofi Kingston versus Team Priceless for the World Tag Team titles. It was supposed to happen at Cyber Sunday, but they moved it to Raw instead because people didn't vote for it for whatever reason. And I just remember being so excited when Punk and Kingston won the belts. That was a very good match. It's on Punk's DVD. And really, really enjoyed that match. So probably one of my favorite October matches. 2009, Orton and Cena had a really good Iron Man match. 2010, nothing really. 2011, nothing really. 2012, nothing really. So probably the tag team title match, I guess, from when at least I've been watching anyway. Or Lesnar and Taker from last year's Hell in a Cell. That was a really good match too. Next question of his, favorite October wrestling show ever, whether it be a Raw, SmackDown, NXT TV, TakeOver, pay-per-view, etc. Again, it would have to be a show that I watched, that I was a fan for. It would probably have to be TakeOver Respect. I was at a Raw with RJ last October. No, that's hard. Oh, man. You know what? Because I was at a WWE Fan Appreciation Show, which I talked about here on the channel before, last year on the 5-year anniversary on October 30th, 2010. And that was a really, really fun show. So shows that I've been in attendance for, probably that one. Definitely. No, fuck. Because it was also at an indie show where I met fucking Daniel Bryan 10 years, or not 10 years ago. 7 years ago, too. Or 6 years ago. So that's really hard. October's usually a really, I love October. It's usually a really good month. Favorite show that I've been in attendance for? Probably WWE Fan Appreciation Day. And that Raw that I went to with RJ Lashley was also really good in the month of October. Because Lesnar was there too. But favorite show on TV? Takeover Respect from last October. Really good show. The October pay-per-views really aren't that good, or at least haven't been that good in recent years. But that was a really good show. Takeover Respect. Favorite October... I already answered that. Favorite types of candy. Love M&M's. I'm a Skittles guy. Kit Kats, Twix. Snow Caps. Love Snow Caps. I know RJ hates them or something. I think Was he the one who hated Snow Caps? I'm pretty sure he did. I don't know. Love Snow Caps, though. I know I was talking about him with this a while ago when I brought Candy to his place to watch like a pay-per-view or something. Yeah, love Snow Caps, M&M's, Twix, Kit Kats, Skittles. I got a whole bunch of candy with Starburst. I love too. I have this whole trick or treat box with candy in it that I got sent up to me a couple days ago. So I've been eating that over the past couple days. I'm a complete fat ass, but love candy. So love that aspect of Halloween. And finally, from Brandon, favorite scary movie of all time. I'm not a big scary movie fan, really. To be quite honest with you, I'm not a huge horror movie fan. I do not watch many horror movies. So if I had to be honest, See No Evil. Like I said, I really enjoyed See No Evil. I'm not a big horror movie fan, but I always enjoyed that movie from the first time I saw it 3 years ago. I've watched it every year since. I got to watch it again this year in the next couple days. And number 2. But I always love See No Evil, so that'd probably be my favorite scary movie of all time. At Swagzio, thoughts on WWE calling Hell in a Cell a triple main event? Does that mean the women won't main event? No, it doesn't. It does not necessarily mean that. You know the whole Mick Foley Facebook post, he said it would and then it wouldn't. He was absolutely right. They do not know until the day of what match will be headlining. It could change on a whim. They do not know for sure. So I think the women will main event. I think they should main event. Why the fuck wouldn't they? I'm a lot more excited for that match than I am Owens and Rollins or Rusev and Reigns or anything else on that card. So again, like I said earlier, it would be asinine for them to not close the show with the women. Is Bobby Roode's feud with Ty Dillinger a step down for Roode? I wouldn't say so. I think if anything, it's a step up for Ty Dillinger. It's not like Bobby Roode was NXT champion. Now he's being demoted to a feud with Ty Dillinger. I think NXT saw a great opportunity to put two Canadian fan favorites in a match against each other in Canada, and they took it, which as they should have. It's going to be a really fun match. The entrances will be glorious in a perfect 10. Perfectly glorious. Or gloriously 10, I guess. So I can't wait for that. But no, it's not a step down for Roode at all. The guy was just feuding with Andrade Almas, of all people. He was on the same level, if not lower, than Ty Dillinger. So I have no problem at all with Roode and Dillinger for TakeOver. At Sean Marquista, can you see the Spirit Squad getting a tag team title shot soon? I can. I've said this before, but I can. Otherwise, why would they still be around? They just beat Kenny Dykstra, just pinned Heath Slater on SmackDown a couple days ago or a week ago. So it seems like it is building to a tag team title match of some sort at some point in the near future. Maybe not at Survivor Series, but because they're gonna have that whole tag team elimination match with the best tag teams from each brand. So to not have the tag team champions in that match would be stupid. So they have to have Slater and Rhino in that match. So they probably will do it in the next couple weeks. I hope they keep around Dykstra at least. I don't think they will keep around either him or Mikey, but for the meantime, a tag team title feud with Mikey and Kenny, I'm completely in favor of. What 5 men, speaking of Survivor Series, what 5 men would from both Raw and SmackDown would you pick to compete in the elimination match at Survivor Series? So my teams would consist of the following, as of right now. From Raw, Rollins, Jericho, Owens, Reigns, and Strowman. I know people would be thinking Rusev, but I think Strowman will be that big heavy for Raw, get a nice little boost from being in that match. And it's not a big stretch to say that he's going to be involved in the match. The guy's been undefeated for months, so it's not that really big of a stretch. For SmackDown, AJ Styles, Dean Ambrose, John Cena, Dolph Ziggler. And again, instead of The Miz, I'd be fine with Miz. I'd be very happy with Miz. He's been a big part of SmackDown in recent months. But I'd go with Baron Corbin. I think he's going to be the counterpart for Braun Strowman. And he's been on a roll lately too, so I'd go with Braun Strowman. If WWE went all the way with their push, who would have been more successful, Mr. Kennedy or Drew McIntyre? I gotta go with Kennedy. I think McIntyre, they had their chance with him. They were going to put the briefcase on him, the Money in the Bank briefcase, in the summer of 2010. And even by that point, he was already kind of losing steam. Because he lost the IC title to Kofi Kingston. He lost the feud to Matt Hardy. And they were going to put the briefcase on him? People would have looked at him as like a loser, you know what I mean? And not that it would have been a bad thing. He probably would have won the world title at some point, but they thought Kane winning the belt was more important, which I thought was better anyway. McIntyre's always been really good, but and I know we always talk about, oh, he was the chosen one, he should have been a world champion, but really, early on, people weren't saying that. The guy was kind of boring. I mean, he should not have been wasted in 3MB of all things, don't get me wrong. But really, he was not world championship material. Kennedy, early on anyway, Kennedy, on the other hand, absolutely fucking was. They could have put the world title on him at any point from 07 to 09, and he would not have looked out of place whatsoever in the main event scene. So Kennedy, I feel like, would have been a big star had he not gotten suspended and hurt and hurting other people and had backstage heat on him, all this other shit. So he would have been a lot more successful, in my opinion, than Drew McIntyre. They gave him one shot and they fucked up and they never tried again with him. Kennedy, on the other hand, they gave him multiple opportunities. And whether it was him, the company, whoever, fucked it up every time. But that really goes to show they thought that he was going to be a bigger success story than McIntyre ever would have been, in WWE anyway. At Brad Brodar, assuming he remains IC champion once his feud with The Miz wraps up, who would you like to see Dolph Ziggler feud with next? So I've talked about this before. I really don't know. I think Baron Corbin would be great as IC champion, but we already saw Ziggler and Corbin a bunch of times a couple months ago, so I really don't want to see that. I mean, him and Hawkins would be cool, but Hawkins means nothing, and no one gives a shit about the guy. If they turn Ziggler, then maybe Ziggler and Cruz. That'd be nice. On the heel side, there really aren't many guys I want to see him face for the IC title. So, unless they bring someone in, I don't really know, to be honest with you. Maybe AJ would be cool, but he's busy right now, obviously. I don't really know. I really don't know. Maybe Wyatt. Wyatt would be a good fit for that IC title. And we haven't seen much of Ziggler and Wyatt, so I guess Wyatt once his feud with Orton's over. At Brad Brodar, I already said his first question. His second question, who are you rooting for in the Ty Dillinger versus Bobby Roode match at TakeOver Toronto? Oh, it's so hard. I'll be rooting for both guys, but I'll go with glorious Bobby Roode. The glorious one. I know how good Roderick Strong is, but do you think being a tag team wrestler is beneath Austin Aries? Not really, just because I think this will serve a purpose in the end. I mean, Tommy got hurt, so they're not doing Aries and Tommy at TakeOver Toronto next month, so they can't do that. So you might as well put them in the tag team division for right now. Have some great matches with Team 6-1 coming up, with all the other teams and the rest of the brackets in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. I have no problem with that. And then once their team is over with, you can break him up, turn Roderick Strong's face if he isn't one already, and do a little feud between those guys in NXT. They could have some kick-ass matches in NXT, so I'm completely fine with them teaming up for right now. I know you're a big fan of Neville, so what did you think of him losing to Bo Dallas in such convincing fashion? I'm not a huge Neville fan. I just think it's disgusting the fact that the guy loses to Bo Dallas in 2 minutes on Raw. What a disgrace. I know they're both former NXT champions, but Bo Dallas is damaged goods. There is no getting back from him now. There is no salvaging his career. Even the whole serious character, I just have a really hard time getting behind it. Neville really still has a lot of untapped potential. He's a way better athlete. He's way more over than Bo Dallas ever was. Still is, surprisingly, despite the fact he fucking loses all the time. He's such a loser. But, yeah, so I thought it was just, shook my head, really just shook my head. And his last question, I know this may sound like a ludicrous question, pardon my botch, at first, especially since most people don't know much about him, but hear me out. Shinsuke Nakamura will eventually move up to the main roster, and when he does, NXT will need a new major babyface. Having said that, since he's tremendous in the ring and is really charismatic, do you think Shane Thorne of TM61 could fit this role? Again, you said it yourself. You know a lot more about him than I do. He does seem charismatic. Once Nakamura goes up to the main roster, that'll be way too soon. TM61 just debuted a couple months ago in NXT. It is way too soon to be breaking them up and pushing this guy as a top face. So maybe down the line, but definitely not as soon as when Nakamura gets called up, which should be in the next couple months, I'd say. If not, the night after WrestleMania. Here's hoping, fingers crossed. At SilverEye007, if Austin Aries and Roderick Strong are named Team Aries, does that automatically degrade Strong? I think the reason they were called Team Aries was because when they were promoting him, their team for the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, they didn't know who Aries' partner was. So they don't have to call them Team Aries for the remainder of the tournament. They can always change it the next time they wrestle. I don't think even if they do keep it Team Aries, it's not really degrading Strong. But it would be cool. I don't think they ever really had a tag team name in TNA or Ring of Honor either. But it would be cool if we did get a real tag team name for these guys other than Team Aries. At Scarlet1 via Twitter, push, repackage, release Baron Corbin, Rusev, and Nia Jax. Release Nia Jax either way. Not a big Nia Jax fan. She's good, but not as good as Rusev and Corbin, in my opinion. Corbin and Rusev I both really like a lot. I'd push Corbin because I think he needs the push. Rusev could just use some repackaging, I think. I don't know how much, but in Corbin, you don't really need to repackage him. I think his character is great. That Talking Smack promo last week was fucking amazing. So I'd push him, repackage Rusev, release Nia Jax. And what do you make of Daniel Bryan as commissioner that all the heels are seemingly ranting against? He comes across most weeks like a coward. Like he was calling the Miz a coward, and then Baron Corbin just completely berates him. He gets berated by the Miz, Baron Corbin, AJ Styles. It's like the wrestlers on SmackDown are cutting off the balls of the GMs, whereas on Raw, the GMs, Stephanie McMahon, are cutting the balls off of the male roster, and even the women too. So, I mean, he could be portrayed a little better, but I'd rather have that than the GMs, cutting down all the members of the roster, which they do on Raw, which bugs me to no end. Final two questions from at Mr. Singleton16. What is your favorite pay-per-view set design of all time? Royal Rumble 2006 is my favorite. For me, I don't really know if I have one favorite. I love the set design, and I wasn't technically a fan at this point. For any Backlash pay-per-view, by the way, or at least the original pay-per-views, when they had the swinging hooks, which were fucking awesome. For me, Royal Rumble, speaking on that same pay-per-view, Royal Rumble 2008, with the bus and the one-way set, like the way it used to be in MSG, that was a really cool set. In the time I have been a fan, the WrestleMania 28 set I was a big fan of, so probably that one. Any WrestleMania set, it's hard to say from recent years because we have not really had a cool pay-per-view set in a long time. The SummerSlam one was cool, but they started using it for Raw, so it's not really that unique anymore. But either Rumble 08 or WrestleMania 28. And final question for today's episode from at Mr. Singleton16. How come wrestlers don't wear street clothes? They always have their gear on, even when they're at a contract signing. It's one of the many questions. Why do wrestlers always get distracted whenever someone's music plays during a match? A question that we will never probably know the answer to. It's just wrestling. And I mean, there's some questions like that you can answer, it's just wrestling with. And there's some questions like, that's just stupid. That's just downright dumb. But with stuff like that, it is to an outsider, like, why are they still wearing their gear? Hey, maybe they're just always prepared. They're just ready for a fight. They're just spoiling for a fight that they always have their gear on. Randy Orton almost always has his gear on. There was a point for a long time where he never wore pants. For whatever reason, he never wore pants in the ring. For like almost 10 years, the guy never wore pants in any promo we ever cut, which was weird. But, yeah, that's just one of those things where I have to answer, that's just wrestling. So that being said, guys, that was hashtag AskUSM episode 152 here today. As always, thank you for watching, listening. You guys are amazing. If you want to send in questions for next week's big Halloween episode, the Halloween-themed spooky episode, be sure to send in your questions to the episode on Twitter with the hashtag AskGSM at WrestleRant. Find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Graham.Jason.Matthews. You can find me on YouTube right here as well. Be sure to, drop the comment on the status I usually put up on Sunday nights on Facebook or on the wall itself. And right here on YouTube, you can drop a comment right down below. I'll be sure to include your question in next week's edition. So with all that being said, guys, like I said, next week in 7 more days, my favorite holiday of the year. So happy that hashtag falls on a Monday and that Halloween falls on a Monday, the same day as hashtag this year. Cannot wait for that. I'm super excited. So be prepared for the Spooky Skeleton Halloween episode, folks, of hashtag AskGSM. What we're going to be doing differently? Probably nothing at all, but I might even do it face-to-face and wear my costume for you guys because you guys are great. But we'll see, guys. We will see. So I will be at Hell in a Cell on Sunday. So I don't know if I'll be able to get the question up for your questions on Sunday night, but if you're a regular listener of the show, then you'll send in a question anyway. Just tweet me on the Twitter, find me on Facebook, YouTube, whatever, after the pay-per-view's over, before the pay-per-view, if it has nothing to do with that show, whatever. I usually record these shows on Monday mornings around 9, 10 o'clock Eastern time, so just be aware of that, of when you can send in questions and whatnot. So anyway, guys, be well, stay safe, have a great Halloween, an awesome Hell in a Cell weekend. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch you folks down the road.